Hey, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Build Your Copywriting Business podcast. Hey there, Kate.
Hello.
Hello. And welcome to part 2 of a 3-part series. This whole series is all about how to really nail your copywriting interviews. And in the last episode, we talked about how to prepare for the interview. Today, we're going to talk about what needs to happen in the interview and what questions you need to have ready to go and what answers you need to have ready to go as well. So, good news. You applied for it. You were very smart. You did the research and you got into the creative director and you got an interview.
Woohoo.
What do you have to
freak out?
Be really excited for a second, panic for a second, go back to excitement, panic a little bit more.
Pop the champagne and then.
Yes. Spend time shaking in the bathroom. Yes, this is all of the emotions. Absolutely. But I think the mistake that a lot of people, and not just copywriters, but a lot of people in general make is they look at a company's website. They look at usually just the homepage.
Yep.
We've seen that a lot as we were interviewing people.
A lot.
Clearly didn't
Anyone
look
that's
past
been
the
to our
homepage.
company website didn't go to where our actual brands and products are. So they had no idea what we did.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And that's not uncommon in other things too. If you just look at one page, you're not necessarily going to get a good feel, particularly if you're, talking with an agency. You're not going to get a feel for who their clients are, who they're working with. Are they working with certain industries? Are they focused on healthcare and higher ed? Or are they focused on, consumer goods?
Mm-hmm.
It's very hard to know without digging a little bit deeper.
Yeah, I mean, dig into, if this is something that you want, dig into everything.
Mm-hmm.
Read all of the pages on their website. Go to social media. See what they're posting on Instagram and Facebook and LinkedIn. Do
YouTube.
some research.
Are they on TikTok? Are they on Snapchat? Where's their audience? It might be that they're on platforms that you're not on. It's, there's so many platforms now that I'm not even on myself, but other brands, it makes sense for them to be there.
Mm-hmm. Google them and look for news. Click that little news button when you Google and see if they're being written up for doing anything recently. You want to the base level is you want to know this company inside and out.
Mm-hmm. And to that point, it helps you not make assumptions about what the company is or isn't. I think a lot of folks in our group want to work for companies that support their values or kind of are in line with their values. A lot of socially conscious or eco-conscious brands. And you might find that some that are touting that they're eco-friendly or eco-conscious aren't actually walking the walk. And some that actually do support those things and maybe just more quietly so, it's not the front and center of their brand, that they actually do align with your values. So do some digging to find out if what you think is actually true, if you're making any sort of assumptions. Just catch yourself. And we all make assumptions. I mean, that's how we get through life, or else we'd be slowed down, by all these assumptions we're making. But
yeah,
dig into it, make a list of things, catch yourself. Oh, I don't think they align with this. Why do I think that? Okay, let me now Google and see what I can actually find to support that idea.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Well, and let's not forget too that you're going in for a copywriting job. So what copy are they putting out there in the world? What do their ads look like? Or what, if you're interviewing for an internal agency, which is the creative team within a company who does the creative work for that company, versus an agency, an external agency, which does work for a bunch of different companies. Think of that's your typical ad agency that you're thinking of.
That's your Mad Men
agency. Exactly. Yeah. That's your Mad Men. If it's an internal agency, what kinds of stuff is that internal agency doing? What is their marketing? What are their ads? If it's an external agency, who are their clients and what are they doing for their clients? You should not just know the company. You should be really, really well versed on the work that they're doing, because if you get this job, you will be doing that same work. So you should show that you've already done the research, and as much as possible, you could come in and really hit the ground running.
Yeah, absolutely. And by knowing kind of what they're doing, you might get questions like, hey, what opportunities do you see for us on social media? What are we doing that you found really effective? Did you see anything that we were doing that you thought was ineffective, and why? And so you might get questions like these about the work, and you want to have some sort of answer prepared. And now with any question you're getting asked, keep in mind you can always have notes. No one's going to care if, hey, I give me a second, I actually wrote down some notes and I want to check them and make sure I'm giving you a complete answer.
Yeah, that's impressive. If you come into an interview with me, I ask you a question, you say, I was thinking about that just the other day and I jotted down a few notes. I mean, that's great. I don't need you to show me that you are great on the spot. That's not what I need. I need to see, I being the hiring manager in this scenario, I need to see that you understand that these things are important and you think about them. Well, and the thing is too, is that, if you really want this job, and again, here's hoping you do, because why are you going through all this if you don't? And you see the work they're doing, don't hesitate to put together a spec piece for this opportunity, especially if there's nothing in your portfolio that maybe directly relates to what they're doing. Put together a spec piece. Don't take something they're doing now and try to improve on it, because that is definitely not the vibe you want to come in. Like,
I found a typo.
Yeah, don't be that person. Don't come in and say, this is what you're doing and I do it better. But, if they're doing a campaign, say, of magazine ads, and you create one that looks like it would seamlessly, and well, more importantly, sounds like, because it's all about copy, but get a designer to help you. Get one of your design contacts, right? This is why we build a network. Build a portfolio piece, a spec piece that would go right in line with that. I mean, how much more impressive, not how much more, but it couldn't be much more impressive to show that you have the ability to hit the ground running if they hired you. It's not just, well, maybe this person can do it. They sound like they know it. It's you're opening up your portfolio and saying, yes, this is what I put. I saw that this is the campaign. I saw that this is what you're working on. It seemed to me that it was this and this and this. And this is what I put together just to show you what I would probably do. Obviously, I don't know. I didn't have a creative brief for this, but based on what I've seen about the other projects, very, very impressive. Do you have to do it? No, of course not. But do you want this job? It doesn't actually take that much effort to go the extra mile. In fact, it's probably much more like the extra foot.
Yep.
Yes.
Yeah.
But that will separate you from other copywriters. And if you're the copywriter who comes in with a spec piece for the current campaign they're doing, it's so much more impressive than all the other copywriters they're interviewing who didn't bother.
Do it. Yeah. Absolutely. So types of questions you might hear during this interview beyond, hey, what have you checked out on our site? So first and foremost, you want to have done your research, because your research is going to inform lots of the questions that they might ask. But they may also dig into your work and your portfolio with questions like, what's your favorite piece? I've gotten that. I don't know if you've gotten that, Nicki. I've gotten that multiple times. And it feels a little bit of a trap, because my favorite pieces are often the ones that have a really fun voice. They were super fun to write in, very lighthearted puns. I love a pun. A lot of the brands I work with, that's not their voice. They're not going to want to see a super fun tone. They're going to want to see professional, or, I've worked with a lot of finance, healthcare, tech. None of those brands I've worked with in those industries had a super fun voice. So I want to show them pieces, if not from their same industry. And often I don't. My favorite piece that may be the best to show them may not be from their specific industry. If it is, great if you have that. But a lot of them are more either the medium that I know that they're going to want to do, like a lot of web pages. So I might look for, okay, what's one of my best web pages, or the tone again. Okay, this brand was in line. Yes, it's in biotech, but this brand's in, fintech, and it's got a similar tone of voice. So I can show them that I can already write in a voice that's very similar to theirs, and I'm familiar with that, and I can use the words that are going to crop up in that they want to see in their work.
Yeah, and I mean, and you don't. It's not like you have to lie to them and say, no, this this piece is my favorite piece, because they're going to be like,
Right.
really? This is your favorite?
Yeah.
But what you can say is, I'd love to show you two pieces, actually. I want to show you truly my favorite piece. So, show them the fun voice. Maybe that's a direction they're interested in going, whatever. But then also say, but I also want to show you a piece that I think is most in line with what I anticipate the work here would be.
Mm-hmm.
So you're kind of taking control of that conversation a little bit. You don't have to only give them what they ask for. Think of it as a yes and.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, I will give you this, and I will also show you this, and here's why I also want to show you this.
It's like politicians during debates. They get asked a question, they say, yes, and now let me go talk about this other topic, healthcare, even though you just asked me about foreign policy.
Mm-hmm. Yes, here's what I want you to know.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
And that's a very similar question in some ways to if they ask, what's your writing style like, right? I mean, your writing style isn't necessarily your writing style, if ever, besides on your portfolio. Your writing style is going to be the style of your client. And so when they ask a question like that, you want to definitely consider, take a beat, because it can almost feel like a trick question, even if they don't intend it to be such.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. I mean, you can say something along the lines of, well, the mark of a copywriter who knows what they're doing, or a copywriter who is good at what they do, is to blend seamlessly into the company that they're working for. Maybe not those exact words, but this is you preparing for the interview. You know that we're not extemporaneous copywriters, but bring up the point that you have a flexible writing style, and that no matter who your client is, and you could say something, along the lines of as you can see, I have written for, which is part of why we tell you, depth and breadth of style and skill and experience in your portfolio, so that you can say, I can write in different tones depending on what my client is looking for, so that it's not going to sound like me. It shouldn't sound like me. It should sound like the client.
Yeah, absolutely. My favorite, I like to show clients kind of the example before it, fun tone of voice. I have ones that I wrote for a brand that was very, it wasn't, I wouldn't say bro marketing, but it was that if you can picture a bro and how, you typical stereotype here, but me wrote for that type of brand, but then also for a CMO of an arm of Microsoft. Mm-hmm. Very different, very, one very professional, one very like loose, fast and loose with, slight curse words thrown in there were okay. Very different. So I like to show that to people, to be like, yes, both of those things came out of my ability, out of my brain, and whatever you can throw at me, sure, I'm ready to drop in and be able to write and hit the ground running. Because that's what they want, right? They want you to be able to hit the ground running. They don't want you to have so much ramp up time to understand the tone of voice. They want to know that you're going to come in and you might need some feedback. You might need some, direction, and it takes everyone time to settle in, but they know you're going to be able to pick it up and not it won't be so much of a stretch for you. It won't be a challenge. It won't be, we're hiring someone that really can only write in this one voice, and that's not similar to ours.
Well, and they're not going to hire you if you can only write in one voice, which again, depth and breadth in your portfolio. If they only see you can write in one voice and it's not their voice, they're probably not going to hire you. Yeah. Another question that I've gotten, I don't know if you said you got this question, Kate, but who's your favorite copywriter? Which
myself.
Yeah, exactly. Who's got two thumbs and is an excellent copywriter? This guy, which I think is I find that you tend to get it from people who are not in. You don't usually get that from a creative director. You usually get it from a marketing director or something like that. Because the thing is you're not really supposed to know who the copywriter is behind the work. It's the work that is put out there by the company. We are not in it for the fame. It's not the same as ghostwriting. Yeah, exactly. It's not the same as ghostwriting.
Content writing of any kind. Yeah.
But we're not associated with the actual work that we have put out. and you might follow some other copywriters on Instagram, but
that's
it's
not common, I would say, in
yeah,
terms
it's
of copywriters having a brand
Instagram
that
presence.
other
Yeah.
people are familiar with
Yeah,
outside of it.
exactly. The people who are writing the big, the big $1 million ad campaigns, or more than $1 million ad campaigns, and commercials and that kind of stuff, they don't have they're not looking to be a copy, a copywriting influencer or whatever. But so if someone asks you that, this is again one of those, maybe a little bit less but a little bit more redirection of, well, I don't actually have a favorite copywriter, but I have a favorite piece of copy. And that is a great way to answer. If I noticed this ad, and it's quite frankly should be something that we are aware of. Like, well, I saw this ad the other day, or I heard this piece of copy and it's really stuck with me, and here's why I like it. And I don't mean that every single day you need to know what your favorite piece of copy is, but if you're going to head into an interview, this is part of preparing. Like, if you ask me today, what's my favorite piece of copy?
I have an example off the top of my head. It's not my favorite piece of copy, but I remember when Oreo, what I would say if I got this question right now, because it's literally the thing I can think of, is, oh, hey, you know what? I loved when the Oreo team, when the Super Bowl, I think it was, and the lights went out or whatever, and there was darkness, and Oreo did some sort of social media ad that kind of played off the moment, and it was within minutes that their team had created something, put it together, and boom, there it was. I thought that was really clever. And so I think speaking to something that's in the moment like that, to say, hey, this is really cool how they picked up on a moment, there's only certain time frames for things like that to make it relevant, to make it have an impact. And the fact that they were able to do it with such speed, I thought it was so cool. Like, their collaboration must have been great for that team to pull it off. And to speak to that collaborative effort, because often with any copywriting project, yes, there will be some where you go off and you write copy and you're kind of on your own executing the project. But plenty of projects will be a collaborative effort. And companies that have worked with copywriters before know this, that it's not just going to be a final draft being poured out of you every time. Quite frankly, most folks learn that it's not, your job isn't to write perfected copy right off the bat. So speaking to that collaborative effort, I think, is also helpful to say, well, I don't have a favorite copywriter, but this team that pulled off this piece that they might be familiar with, I think can really help resonate and speak to the fact that you're expecting to collaborate, that you're ready to collaborate.
Well, and that kind of leads to another question, which might come up, or at least you should be prepared to talk about, is how do you like to work with designers, or how do you collaborate when it comes to a project? What is your ideal project life cycle, or something along those lines? And that's really going to be your opportunity to say, yeah, I really like to work closely with the people around me, especially if you're going into a company where collaborate, then talk about collaboration. You can say, I really like to spend some time concepting with a designer if that's available. Obviously, I'll go off and write my copy on my own, or really dig in and talk with the marketing manager or whoever's kicking off the project. It's really important to me to know everything there is about the project and understand the strategy. And the more that you can show that you think like a team player, and that coming in, it wouldn't be, don't anybody talk to me, I have to write my copy, and I don't ask questions, the more that you can show that you would come in and bring something to the conversation, that you wouldn't just be that the marketing manager wouldn't say, all right, this is the project, this is the brief, and you wouldn't pick up the brief and go, okay, and walk out of the room. Like a little
assembly line.
Yeah, automaton. Yeah, exactly. That you would say, all right, great, and then ask questions about it and make suggestions and that kind of thing. And then when you're working with a designer, that the two of you would collaborate and you would concept for it. And then once you've done your writing and they've done their design, that the two of you come together. The best thing, and it's so rare to do, which is crazy that it's rare to do, and part of it because we're not in offices right now, but to sit down, you and the designer, sit down in front of a computer screen together after the designer has put the copy and layout, and the two of you go, okay, well, this works here and this works here, and I think we're gonna have to cut this line
the
a little bit
headline.
because yeah, exactly. Nope,
too big.
It looked good before, but it's way too much in layout. And
what does it look like when we shrink it to mobile? Does it stack well? Can we break lines in a different way?
Exactly. Yeah. It's invaluable. And that's the kind of thing that you can talk about. The more that you can show what it would actually be like. So you have demonstrated your copy prowess, right? You've demonstrated your ability to use different tones. And again, if you were smart, you put together a spec piece. So you've demonstrated that you could do the work. Now you want to start talking about what it would actually be like for you to work there, for people to work with you. What kind of, not just a copywriter, but what kind of a worker, a team member are you? And the more that you can talk, and more that you can give people a sense for the fact that you dig in and you like to get your hands dirty and you like to really get into a project, the more valuable they will view you.
Yeah, I think the questions I get most often are around process. They see your final products in your portfolio, which is why it's so important to have a write-up with it to say, here was the challenge, here's how I got here, and here, if you have any results. But people like to hear that process of how do you get from nothing to this great final product? How does your brain work? And to give them a little taste of how that works, I think is really helpful for them to understand, if you know what you're talking about, and it wasn't just this great final product that you somehow got to mysteriously. It takes away some of that mystery, right?
Exactly. Well, and I know that some of you listening or watching may be thinking like, oh, what would I say? What would I say? I don't know what to say. I don't know what I would say. Great. You're not in an interview at this moment. So take some time and come up with some answers to these questions. The reason that we're doing this podcast is, or at least this episode of this podcast, is so that you can be prepared for when you have an interview and you really want to ace these questions. And, it's like all the typical questions, like, what's your greatest strength? What's your greatest weakness? And yes, people do still ask these questions. Yeah. So make sure you have an answer and make sure it's a good answer.
I will say, I asked a question recently in an interview, what's your least favorite, I want to say it's least favorite project to work on, and also just favorite boss, least favorite boss or manager. How did those relationships work? And it was very telling when, a lot of people had great answers prepared of I liked good communication. I didn't like when it felt like I didn't have, my own ability to go off and get some projects done. But there was one answer that was dug into just a personality clash and felt like a rant about a former manager or boss. That doesn't come off well. So you want to be honest, yes, but think of, okay, not just we didn't get along, we butted heads because this person always said this and this. No one wants to hear the story behind it. They want to know, what specific thing was it? Your communication was different styles, and you like direct communication and they were more indirect than you like. So really come up with what the constructive criticism that you had on the situation.
Yeah, I was just going to say what the situation was and what you learned from it.
How would
and
you
why
have solved
you are
it?
now better for it, and how you're constantly improving as a professional. Yeah, and along the same lines as if it's an internal team, or if you're working for a creative director, what kind of creative director do you want to work for? What do you look for in a supervisor? And you can talk about the ability to give me good feedback and give me the opportunity to make those changes on my own, but kind of guide me without writing for me, and talking along those lines, or someone I can really learn from. I have taken myself to a certain level, and I'm really looking for a creative director that can help me put out the best work possible for the company. Because again, don't forget, even when you're in the interview, it still should come back to how you can benefit the company. Don't forget that just because, and yes, in an interview, you're trying to figure out if it's a good fit, you versus them. But let's not forget, you are in this interview trying to market yourself. Even if you are thinking, maybe I don't want this job, you still want them to want you, you know?
You
And
want to
if
leave
you,
a good impression.
yes. And if
The
you think
world
that
is
you,
smaller than we all imagine. You never know when paths can cross again.
exactly. And even if you think you don't want it, it's good, such good practice.
Yeah.
Exactly. Experience. So when you're in these interviews, think about how you can demonstrate again and again and again how you as a copywriter will benefit this company. It's very tempting. We see it on resumes all the time, and especially in interviews, it's very tempting to start talking about you. This is what I want. This is what I like. This is what and it will be tempting too, because you will get asked questions like that. You know, what are you looking for? What are your plans for the future? But there's always going to be a way to answer the question. Yes, and this is what I'm looking for and why, and here's how it would benefit you if you hire me. Not, you don't have to specifically say that. Here's how it would benefit you if you hire me. Don't say it because it's pretty awkward. But you can talk about, this is what I'm looking to develop and how I'm looking to develop, and I'm really looking forward to using that skill to X, Y, Z for this company or whatever. But remember that even though it's an interview, it's still not just about you. It's about what you can do for them. And the more that you can keep that in your head, the more it's going to keep you focused on being the best possible candidate. No, and the same thing really for whether you're interviewing for freelance or full-time or whatever. And same thing with, discovery calls and all that kind of stuff. We spend so much time in our own heads and thinking, like we were talking earlier about, like, I'm excited, now I'm nervous, now I'm excited, now I'm nervous. We spend so much time in our own heads and thinking about our own experience. It can be easy to forget that your experience, if I'm interviewing you, I mean, like, yes, I care about you as a person, but if I'm interviewing you, my top concern is what are you going to do for this company, and how are you going to be as an employee, and how are you going to mix with the team, and how are you going to benefit us as an employee? And so as someone who's being interviewed, that needs to be one of the top things that you're prepared to come in and talk to and display.
And it's a good thing to keep in mind too, when you get a question like, what's a challenging conversation you've had to have and how did you deal with it? I think the how did you deal with it is obviously the more important part. So whatever your challenging situation was, what was your solution? Because the solution is what's going to help the company move forward and keep going and, keep chugging along and not get derailed by whatever it might be, whatever challenge might come up. So have a couple of those in mind of just different scenarios you've been in that not just challenging, but maybe uncomfortable, maybe pushed you out of your comfort zone. Any situation where you're like, ooh, I did this and here's this great solution. Here's how it moved things forward and made things better. Here's ideas I came up with to help the company that maybe weren't even copywriting related. Maybe they were about processes, or, hey, I have a way that I think we can do this more efficiently, or, hey, communication's getting a little off the rails. Can we have a system for what goes through email versus what goes through our chat channel or whatever? Coming up with things and having that list of here's what I've done in other places or other scenarios I've been in. And again, they don't have to be copywriting scenarios. They can be any scenario.
Yeah, exactly. Well, you don't have to literally tell them the most difficult discussion you've ever had to have, or you don't have to tell them the truly worst boss you've ever had, or the truly best boss. It pick something that is relevant. Pick a discussion that maybe it wasn't the worst discussion you've had, and maybe it actually was a relatively easy discussion because you knew this person pretty well, but it was something you had to kind of redirect them on. Like, for example, so when I worked on staff, there was someone, she was a product manager, and whenever she would give feedback, she would say, all right, this doesn't work. And then she would also try to rewrite the copy herself. And obviously that doesn't work because that's my job. But instead of getting huffy about it and being like, she's trying to do my job, blah, 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 I just pulled her aside after a meeting, obviously very private, and said, "Hey, I just wanted to let you know that thank you for the feedback. This is great feedback, but you don't have to rewrite the copy. What works best is just for me to know what didn't work and why it didn't work, and then as your copywriter, I can go through and fix that. Maybe even give you a couple of different options." And in this scenario, she was so grateful, and her misunderstanding was she thought that she was being rude by not offering a solution, and so it was that the most difficult conversation I've had to have? No, by no means. Did I have to do it? Yeah, of course I had to do it.
Mm.
But it wasn't the most difficult conversation. But by telling that, it shows that I'm willing to address a problem, that I'm willing to address it diplomatically, that I don't get huffy if people step on my toes. It's pick stories or pick examples or that show you in your best light,
Mm-hmm.
and show you again as the best possible employee and team member that they are gonna find.
Mm-hmm. To give another example, and this isn't challenging at all, but I think in the sense of how you spin it too, right? So this was back, I was a very junior copywriter, and I got an assignment, I got the brief, and it was like, here's the brief, go. And it was a company I'd been doing work with consistently and freelance work. And so the brief had it was an email, it was pretty relatively straightforward. They were expecting, come back through email and we'd regroup if we really had to. And I read the brief and I thought, this really needs to, we're sending this message, but this really makes sense for people who are already members of this product versus people who aren't. Can we send two different versions? And so as a junior copywriter, I was like, ooh, am I stepping on the product person's, they're the ones that sent the brief. Am I kind of messing up their strategy? This is their strategy. But I was like, nope, this is the right thing to do. Does it take more work for me in the long run? Yes, I was getting paid for it, of course, but it's creating more work for myself, which I didn't mind, and for the team as a whole potentially. And so that's what I did. I said, hey, here's this idea. Before I go and execute on this, I have what you want ready. I think it'd be very easy to slightly make some slight, tiny changes and actually do, segment the list that you're sending to. And they were like, great idea. Love it. But it still felt like, to your point of stepping on people's toes, like, oh, this isn't my lane. I should just stay in my lane.
Mm-hmm.
But there's a way to go about it. And so you can spin that story of like, here's how I went about it. And here's why it was great for everyone. On the flip side of that too, that same company, I remember there was a project and I was like, hey, I don't actually think this is the problem. I think this is your problem. And they were like, oh yeah, thank you for pointing it out. It took work off my plate, which meant I didn't get paid for it. And again, freelancer, this wasn't on staff where I'm just getting paid no matter what. But that was okay for me because again, being a good partner, showing that I was looking out for the company, thinking beyond my copy role to think more holistically about the company and what might make most sense, and to just raise those questions. And worst case, they came back and said, nope, we still want this one. Okay, fine, cool, here it is. But not being afraid to raise those questions.
Yeah. It's not just about copy in these interviews at all.
Yeah. Which, speaking of questions, don't forget to ask questions.
Yes,
don't forget to bring questions.
Point.
There's always an opportunity when the interviewer says, do you have any questions for me? And there's nothing worse than they're like, no. It comes off a little, really? We answered them all during the interview? That doesn't seem, especially when it's been one way for the bulk of the interview. So come up with some, what are you interested in? What's it like working for the company? What's your culture like? You don't want to get too specific of like, what's your vacation policy? Can I work from home 2 days a week? Anything that's about you and about what's going to benefit you. What's the salary? Not quite the place to do it in the first conversation. But those cultural questions are totally fine. Hey, what's a typical day like? What types of projects would I be working on? What's your 5-year vision for the company? Things like that get you genuinely should show your interest in the company. So what are you interested to know about the company?
Yeah, my favorite one, a go-to whenever, and it's very likely I will never interview for a job again. But when it actually different from discovery calls, of course, those will go on. But my favorite was always, okay, what's your favorite thing about working here? And, they give you like, I just really love the people. And then I follow that up with, okay, what's your least favorite thing about working here? What do you really dislike about working here? Because that's where you start to get some real answers. And they go, oh, well,
It's a big organization. Things move slow. Or what? Yeah.
Okay, all right.
Those are good ones.
Good for me to know. Exactly.
Yes.
And you, at the same time, too, you can ask questions about pieces that you've seen, or, what was the process for, I've told you about how I usually work on a project. What is your project or your project life cycle from beginning to end? How does that look like? How many stakeholders are usually involved with projects? How many, ask about, the culture, ask about how projects happen, ask about, how often do teams collaborate? Are you mostly just going to be working with a creative team, or are you going to get to work with the development team? Are you going to get to work with the product team and all that kind of thing?
If it's an agency, which clients is this role for? Is it with several clients? Is it for one client? Because sometimes an agency, they might just have a really big client that they need some extra hands on, particularly freelance hands. And so you might be on just one client. So you need to know that. It's helpful information for you to know, to say, am I interested in working with this one client? Or was I really hoping to get more of the agency experience and have different clients I was rotating through?
Yeah, there are so many questions. Even just go down and jot those 5 or 6 down that we just gave you and bring them with you.
Save the episodes and, have it on hand for if and when your next, I should say when, it's not if.
Yeah.
When your next call with any potential client, employer, whoever.
Yeah, you do not want to be the person that goes, you answered them all. No, don't have any questions. It shows that it's a bad look. You're not thinking strategically about the company. You're not it's a bad look. Don't be that person. Okay, so there you have it. Now you know what you need to do in the interview. Questions and answers you need to prepare. Now, we have made a 3-part series. So we had an episode before this about what you need to do how to apply and how to prepare for coming to the interview. So if you haven't listened to that yet or watched it yet, go back and check that one out. Now, coming up next, we're going to talk about what you need to do after the interview. You may be thinking, well, the interview's over. What do I have to do? There's nothing to do.
Oh, so much.
Au contraire,
but not so much, really.
Just a couple little things, but really important things. So we'll catch you in that next episode. Bye, everybody. Thanks for watching. Make sure you don't miss any tips, tools, or tactics for copywriters by clicking subscribe right now. And of course, you can always find us over at filthyricwriter.com. We'll see you next time.